We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast, brought to you by Andrew Wommack Ministries.
Hello, this is Andrew Wommack, and this is our Monday night Truth and Liberty broadcast. I've got our chief counsel here, Richard Harris, and this guy is a blessing. He not only is a lawyer and helps us with a lot of things, and he has been a part of this Truth and Liberty since the inception, but he also runs our business school and...
Practical government school.
Oh, excuse me.
That's all right.
Business school. We got 8 schools. I'm sorry. It's practical government. So that's the reason we've got him with us, to keep me straight. And tonight, we have the added benefit of having David and Tim Barton. They are remoting in with us from Aledo, Texas. So welcome, guys. We're glad to have you with us.
Good to be with you. Good to be with you.
I tell you, this is father and son, and in case you don't know David and Tim Barton, we could spend 20 or 30 minutes giving them an introduction. They've won all kinds of awards. Anyway, but they are people that love God, and they are historians, have the largest personal collection of U.S. Documents or artifacts?
Original material.
Original documents, and I was just at their place in January, and I tell you what, it's an impressive place. Man, you got all kinds of not only documents and papers and stuff, but you had swords, muskets, you got a bunch of stuff. Matter of fact, I guess that's your place behind you, right?
It is. Actually, this flag that is flying vertically over our heads, that's from D-Day. That was the 3rd flag that went in on D-Day. That big flag behind us is a World War II battleship flag. That's a World War II section behind us. We're kind of sitting off on this side over here is a lot of entertainment and media kind of stuff, old movies. On this side over here is Founding Fathers. You can't quite see it, but over my shoulder, a bunch of muskets from the American Revolution. So it's loaded up with original artifacts and documents. Probably about 120,000 items we have from before 1812, originals or copies of originals.
So as I said, their museum there, or is that what you call it, is a museum?
That works for us, museum, collection, whatever.
All right, but anyway, you're located about, an hour outside of Fort Worth?
Actually, we're about 15 minutes outside of Fort Worth.
Oh, really?
So we're the first town west of Fort Worth.
Well, the way I came to it was I came from Decatur, so I wasn't exactly sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're in Aledo, Texas. You could go visit their museum or their headquarters there. It's WallBuilders. Give them a way to contact you, like a web address or something. We'll put it up on the screen also, but how do they get in touch with you?
WallBuilders.com is the best way to contact. We do tours on request, and so we actually set up a couple a week or a month, and so they can get online, find out more about those tours. And we have all kinds of information on our website dealing with culture, with American history, with politics and government, and so lots of stuff at WallBuilders.com.
And you're also very well connected. Like I went to the U.S. Capitol, and you did a tour of the Capitol and showed all of the biblical history of what's going on, and you are connected with all of the politicians. You got your fingers involved. I think if I remember correctly, you actually helped write the Republican, what do you call it there?
Platform.
That's right.
So, man, that's just awesome. We appreciate everything you're doing. So it's a great privilege to have you with us. So we got a lot to cover. Right before we went on air, I mentioned that we might say something about Mueller not giving any indictment and his report showing that there was no Russian collusion, and your response was?
Well, it depends on where you get your news, because you've got 3 members of Congress, committee guys today saying the report is really clear. It does not exonerate Trump. We have here, it indicates that there was obstruction of justice. And in Congress, we're going to have to look into that and do some serious looking. And that's impeachable kind of stuff. So they're talking about how bad it is from the report. Now, of course, on the other side, my question would be, wait a minute. They said there's no collusion. There's no crime. So how can you obstruct justice when there's no crime to obstruct justice from? It doesn't even make sense. But nonetheless, a lot of the media outlets are interviewing guys and saying, well, this clearly does not exonerate Trump. He's clearly got problems with obstruction of justice, and that's got to be looked into. So this is going to be a story that stays alive on certain news outlets, major news outlets. Other news outlets are going to have exactly the opposite story. They're going to report what the Attorney General said,
Yeah,
So
the Attorney General said that there was no indictment and no collusion.
Right.
And
Right.
for nearly 2 years, they've been saying, oh, we need to trust this,
right.
this investigation. We need to let it run its course. And now that it turned out with a different outcome than they want, they're just going to find something else to gripe about.
Andrew, what I think is the most amazing thing out of this is if you or me or Tim, if any of us had a 2-year investigation by 100 prosecutors and attorneys, they would have plenty to indict us on. Not that we know what we've done wrong,
Right.
but there is a book out there called 3 Felonies a Day. There are now 4,500 felonies in the United States, and most average law-abiding citizens commit at least 3 felonies a day without even knowing about it because we have that many laws. So the fact that they can put dozens of attorneys, millions, tens of millions of dollars, and they can scrub him the way they did and have nothing to indict him on, to me, that says more than anything the Attorney General said. I really thought they would find something, because with any average citizen, you would be able to indict us for something.
Yeah.
We might not know about it, but we'd have an indictment. I think it's amazing they came out with nothing to indict him on.
So do you think that this is going to come back to hurt the Democrats, or do you think that they'll be able to keep this narrative alive? Or are people getting fed up after 2 years and all of this money, like you said, and they didn't come up with any evidence? What's going to be the fallout?
They're getting fed up with several things. I think it can come back to hurt them. If they let it drop and move on, it's not going to hurt them bad. If they keep it alive and keep pushing it, if they start talking impeachment and trying to push impeachment, it's going to hurt them. Tim and I were looking at stats here last week, and if you recall back when New York passed their really hardcore pro-abortion law,
Yes.
you know, infanticide almost, you had the governor of Virginia talk about that. What we saw in the polls was among youth voters, there was nearly a 40% shift in the way they thought about that issue.
Wow.
Among Democrats, there was a spurt, increase of 17% of Democrats becoming more pro-life. They said, my gosh, if that's what these guys believe, that's not what we believe. And so I think if they keep this investigation thing alive, it's going to have the same kind of effect.
And I would point out, I don't think they're going to let it go for a while because we're so polarized. They care more about their side winning and having something to blame Trump for. And this is just something they can focus on right now because it's his attorney general who has cleared him, right? And so even though Mueller didn't really find anything on him, it's his attorney general, and we can't really trust an attorney general because that's somebody he appointed. And so they're gonna harp on it because this is just what they have to harp on right now. And they don't really care about what's true. They don't really care about what the report says. They just care about trying to bring Trump down. And because that is their agenda, truth is the casualty in this war because they don't mind being dishonest. They don't mind misleading people as long as they can, in their mind, slow down or prevent Trump from being what they would consider to be successful. And so I don't think the Democrats are going to let this go. However, I don't think it's going to help them either because people are frustrated. They're so tired of this nonsense, and it's only going to push the people in the middle further away from them in the midst of polarization.
I think there's something interesting going here that we've talked about that's not being reported, and it goes back to a case. We've had a number of really good decisions out of the U.S. Supreme Court recently, and in a recent decision, Justice Thomas talked about the fact that the court really needs to go back and relook at the case that was called New York Times versus Sullivan. And in that case, the First Amendment thing, what the court has done is it doesn't give everyone the same First Amendment protection. Andrew, you're a public official. I'm considered a public personality. Therefore, people can lie about us more than they can anybody else. And newspapers can get away with saying more bad stuff about us than anybody else can. Now, if the newspaper said something about Richard, for example, they couldn't say about him what they could say about you. And so there's a double standard there that if you're what they consider a public personality, you have less First Amendment protection. What's happening is Justice Thomas is saying, no, that needs to come back to us. We need to reexamine. Everybody should have First Amendment protection. And I think what will help drive this is Nicholas Sandmann. You remember the kid from Covington High School there? Uh-huh. They've got that $275 million lawsuit against CNN.
I do too.
150 against, they've got 52 media outlets. I think 150 against Washington Post. Now that's a kid who doesn't have a high public standing. Therefore, the bar comes much lower. The media is going to have to be accurate in what they said about him, or they're going to have to pay a lot. Now, With you and me, they don't have to be accurate because we're considered public folks. That's why they can say what they want about Trump. But if the court reexamines that case, and if the Nicholas Sandmann case goes forward, and CNN, Washington Post, these other guys start getting hit with these mega lawsuits, then what it will do is it will start forcing the media back into having to tell the truth rather than enunciate their agenda. And if that happens, all of America is going to be a lot better off. We all get the same First Amendment protections, regardless of our status or whether we're elected or not elected or whatever. So I think that all this bad stuff Tim's talking about, the media is going to carry their own narrative forward. We might be on the verge of starting to see some of that shut down over the next year or so. We'll see.
You know, I think that you've characterized everything just perfectly. I agree 100%. Do you really believe that this is going to backfire on them and that it's going to change public opinion and that we have an opportunity to see the House and the Senate, well, the Senate's already ours, but the House regained in the 2020 elections?
I think there's a chance of regaining the House. A lot of what happened in the last election was a result of what's called ballot harvesting. Republicans were unaware of it, weren't ready for ballot harvesting, and every single closely contested race in California, we lost to ballot harvesting. There were, 8 or 10 or 12
you need
Republicans.
To explain that,
what is
David.
it?
I've heard this explanation, but a lot of people won't know what you're talking about.
In ballot harvesting, most citizens, we think of our vote as being something that there should be a lot of integrity to it. It should be protected by the state in the sense that I should be able to vote for myself. No one can go in and vote for me. And if I vote, my vote should be counted. I don't care whether you're conservative, liberal, moderate, left, right, it doesn't matter. Your vote should count. So what happens with ballot harvesting is instead of saying you have to be an elected official, a county clerk, you have to be an election judge or something else to handle the vote, it says any citizen can go collect votes and turn them in.
And specifically, there are some states where it is a written ballot. And so everybody in the state, they're sent something in the mail, right? A ballot in the mail where you get to fill it out and turn it in. So ballot harvesting is where you can go door to door, knock on the neighbor's door. Hey, have you filled this out? Oh, you haven't? Let me help you. So you can go harvest the ballots. You can influence their vote. And then you can take all those ballots back or maybe lose some along the way. So you can really control the outcome. If you know you have a certain neighbor, maybe who's going to vote different than you would want, you don't have to turn that in, or you can go help collect from other people. So it really is, in Texas, you go to a voting location and it's electronic. And so unless somebody hacks the system, you cannot electronically influence that. And by the way, very difficult to hack the system. So that's really not a danger. For anybody that might be into conspiracy theories, that's really not as easily done as we would think it is. Nonetheless, at something in Texas, you go to a ballot location, there's a booth electronically. I can't go door to door and collect a piece of paper from my neighbors and influence an election that way. I can go door to door and say, hey, you should go vote. Ballot harvesting in many states, they actually have paper ballots that are mailed out, and you can go collect those ballots, and you are responsible to turn those in or maybe not turn them in, as the case is.
And see what happens in nearly every state, even those that have electronic voting like Texas, we do have absentee ballots. And so what will happen is you may have a nursing home, a retirement center with 150 people there, and you go in and say, do you want me to request absentee ballots for you? And they say yes. And so you get the ballots in, and then after they vote, you go collect them as just an individual citizen, and you notice, oh, that guy's got a picture of Ronald Reagan. We don't want to turn his ballot in. And this one's got a picture of Donald Trump. Definitely won't turn that one in. And so it's an individual citizen collecting votes and may or may not turn them all in. Now, if it were an elected official collecting votes, an election judge or a county clerk, man, you could prosecute them for not turning those ballots in. But there's a lot of states that have ballot harvesting where just ordinary citizens can go get it, and there's no guarantee they have to turn it in, and there's no problem if they don't. And that really surfaced in this election. A lot of legislatures right now are trying to pass anti-ballot harvesting laws. But the Democrats are very prepared for this. They trained their guys for it. In states like Oregon and Washington, you do not go to the polls to vote. It is all voted. I mean, you vote ballots. Everybody's given a ballot. So you can collect that, turn it in. Makes it really hard if you don't have the integrity of the ballot. And that's what it is.
And one thing that's important to note, too, is generally as Christians, we believe in truthfulness and honesty and integrity. Mm-hmm. But our agenda, right, is to honor and glorify God in our life. And therefore, we want to live a godly lifestyle and have godly behavior. If your primary agenda is to win an election, you compromise truth, integrity,
That's
godliness. That doesn't matter to you because the number one thing you care about is winning the election. Or, right, maybe you view Trump as evil and we have to keep Trump from being elected. Therefore, the ends justify the means. So if I have to do something that would seemingly be dishonest, it's for the good of America because I'm keeping Trump from being elected. This is how they can rationalize and even try to defend that position. But in a culture where truth has become relative, where we don't necessarily believe in biblical values as an American culture like we used to, that's the only way this stuff can happen is because people don't believe in right and wrong anymore. As Christians, we would say, absolutely, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not right.
So you bring up a good point here, and that is that the godly people are constrained by things. They don't go out and just attack people and do this, but the ungodly don't have those same restraints. And man, they will play dirty and do things. That's the reason I think that this young man who's now suing the Communist News Network for $250 million, that's, I think it's good, but most Christians wouldn't respond that way. They'd just turn the other cheek. But it's time that we start pushing back.
Yeah. Well, as Christians, we believe in accountability. We believe in it both here and in the hereafter. But if you don't have a biblical viewpoint and you don't believe in accountability, that everything is right now, then the end justifies the means. And I can do whatever I need to get it done. I love what John Adams said back in 1768. He was in the British system at that point in time, and he was in politics, young man in the legislature, and he watched people all around him compromise and do things that he would not have done. And he characterized and said, you have politicians, and a politician is someone who will compromise their principles and their values in order to gain a success or a victory or get reelected or whatever. He said, on the other hand, you have statesmen, and statesmen will do the right thing all the time, even if it costs them the next election. And so he said, now, what makes the difference between a statesman and a politician? Why will some people compromise their principles and others will not? And he said, the answer is a fear of future rewards and punishments. He said, for me, I can never be a politician. I will have to be a statesman. He said, the duration of future punishment terrifies me. The fact that I might spend eternity in hell scares me straight. I'm not going to do anything wrong, even if I lose the election. And it's that sense of accountability to God that, first of all, keeps us from doing the wrong thing. But the second thing is you have to have a sense of accountability to the society itself. And if you lose that accountability and I'm the only thing that matters, and my beliefs are the only thing that matter, man, then it's hard to watch all the ways that you could cheat an election. It's hard to watch all the ways that you can cheat ballots. You can't think of, and we don't think of that because that's just not the way we're wired with accountability. But that's the way a lot on the other side are wired. Right now, it's interesting that the best way to predict Republican versus Democrat votes, the single most important indicator is not whether you're black or white or whether you're rural or whether you're urban. It's not your income level. The easiest way to predict a Democrat voter is they are the least likely to go to church. They're the least religiously active. The best way to predict whether you'll be a Republican voter is you're more frequent in church attendance. So church attendance right now is the most frequent indicator of whether you'll vote Democrat or Republican, hands down better than any other indicator.
Well, and let me point out, that's a really easy thing to verify because think about the Democrat platform right now where in Congress, the Democrats voted that infanticide is okay. It's okay to murder a baby once they're alive. There's no way you can be a faithful church attender and believe that there is a God and God's the author and giver of life and read Psalm 139 or Jeremiah 1:5. And there's no way you can study the Bible and be an active church member and think it's okay to murder children after they've been born. But that's the position the Democrats have taken. Republicans taken the other position, right? And this is where in the modern culture, this is not saying Republicans are always biblical and Democrats are always wrong. That's just obviously not accurate at all. There's a lot of Republicans who are not biblical, and there's actually some Christian Democrats. Although generally, as far as the party,
that sounds like an oxymoron, right there.
Christian Democrat.
But generally, where the parties are concerned, you do see that. When it comes to Democrats that hold biblical positions, we can name 2 Democrats that hold biblical positions.
Literally
in the whole country, or
that's on the national level.
Yeah.
Wow. I agree with what you guys are saying.
Absolutely.
And, John Adams, of course, you know this quote better than I do, but he says democracy is totally unfit for anybody but a religious, moral people if we ever cease to be moral. then exactly what you're talking about happens.
Yeah,
and by your own definition of what a statesman is, did you know that in a sense you're describing Trump? Trump cannot be bought. And Trump doesn't care. I think he might care. He wants to be reelected because he's got more to do, but he's not going to compromise his convictions. In that sense, we are actually witnessing a statesman who is doing the right thing and not just a politician.
Yeah,
I can say he has kept his word more than any political figure in my lifetime that I know of. And he's been willing to take more of a beating to do so. And even if he has to endure a 2-year investigation, he did not change his agenda. As a matter of fact, what he did even this week in reaffirming Israel and reaffirming Golan Heights, and it's not occupied territory. I mean, that Golan territory, that's Israel's territory. And so we're seeing him do things that get him no political reward, but they're the right things to do. And that's what's significant.
Not only that, but this week he also put out an executive order about free speech on campuses because the conservatives have been, silenced. And beaten, physically beaten, and all kinds of things. And so here he is standing up for conservative free speech, Christian free speech.
What does he get out of that? What political constituency is he going to get more votes from for doing that? It's not there, but it was the right thing to do. And that's a constitutional thing to do. We should be upholding the Constitution, First Amendment. He's doing that. And I cannot tell you how pleased I have been. And I will tell you, I did not expect that level of constitutional defense. I did not expect that level of moral height, of trying to pursue moral issues in the culture. I did not expect that. I thought he'd be good on some areas, judges and other things. But oh my gosh, he has done so much more than what even we have called as very evangelical presidents in recent years. He's done so much more than what they've done.
He's also followed the Constitution closer than any president over the last 100 years, which is totally shocking because we definitely thought this was going to be a guy who loved the executive orders, who said, we're going to do this and I'm writing my name and you're going to make it happen. He's followed the Constitution better than any president, arguably since Calvin Coolidge. I mean, he's like the founding fathers in regards to limiting his behavior to the Constitution, because even the executive order he just gave, he did not tell college campuses that you have to abolish all of your free speech safe spaces. He recommended that you endorse the First Amendment and uphold free speech. He stayed in constitutional bounds by not putting a strict standard saying you have to. He didn't have the authority to tell them they have to.
That's right.
He says, but I endorse free speech on college campuses, which is what he should do. But even in his executive orders, he's limited to what he has the constitutional authority to do.
And what in that executive order, he said, by the way, if you get federal funds, then you will protect the First Amendment. But if you don't get federal funds, I can't make you do anything. There's no executive order I can give that will cause you to do it. I can only take the funds away federally, and that may be only 3 to 6% of your funding. So I can't make you observe free speech, but I'll tell you, if you don't, I'll take that federal funding away, which again is not a large segment. But all these schools are wanting every bit of money they can get. So it really was a very constitutionally constructed executive order. And he went as far as he could go under the Constitution and went no further. And that's what's really has been shocking to us is so many executive orders. It's not been the phone and the pen. It's been the pen and the Constitution. And that's been real different.
And, this is a ploy that the Democrats have been using for decades, is to take away federal funding from education or whatever, and they use that to intimidate. And for some reason, the Republicans haven't stood up. But I'm just thrilled to see somebody standing up and doing it.
It's fantastic. It reminds me of Trump's predecessor, what he did with the bathroom bill, all that, where out of thin air, Obama crafts some rule requiring state schools to have transgender bathrooms. And, where's the constitutional power and authority to do that? But it didn't stop him. So it is refreshing, isn't it?
This is the way that the Democrats or the liberals have been operating for decades. And finally, we got somebody who is outside of the system that came in. And like you were talking about how constitutional he is, I don't know this for sure, but I think I've heard you and other people say that even though Trump is relatively new to politics, when he came in, he has asked for people. Have you been an advisor on some of these issues? And some of he's been surrounding himself with people who are experts, and he's taking their advice.
Well, see, it has been so good because when you come in as president, you get 4,000 appointments that you can make. And some places are more important than others. You know, when George W. Bush became president, he made sure and put the pro-life people not in the Commerce Department, but in Health and Human Services and other places where pro-life really matters. You know, whether you're pro-life on highways really doesn't matter. Whether you're pro-life when it comes to health and sex education and things like, yeah, that matters. And so Trump, 4,000 appointments, it doesn't matter necessarily that your secretary is going to be a constitutional expert. Well, that's fine if she is. But what you want is the chief counsel of the White House, who is going to help choose your judges. You want him to be a strict constitutional expert. And it's been those kind of guys that he has been loading up with constitutional expertise. And so I've been really impressed that he has chosen such key spots to put the right constitutional people in there and the ones that make a difference. You know, it may not be as important to have a strict interpretation of the Constitution in the Veterans Department because you really don't deal with constitutional issues. You deal with the laws that Congress passes. But it does matter if you're creating, for example, a new religious liberty department in Health and Human Services under Secretary Carson. They said, we're not going to go after people because of their conscience beliefs anymore. Mm-hmm. That's constitutionally wrong. And so the new offices they're creating to enforce the Constitution and these groups that really matter is significant. What he's doing within the State Department, even on defunding, they've defunded it's going to be hard to say this the right way, but the Office of Global Women's Initiatives. And you think, oh, he's anti-woman. No. Hillary told us that the Office of Global Women's Initiatives exists for the sole purpose of promoting homosexuality and abortion in all nations across the world. And they actually held out State Department funding, like in Kenya. They said, Kenya, you have a prohibition on abortion in your Constitution. Until you get that prohibition on abortion out of your Constitution, you're not going to get State Department American money. Wow. So Trump comes in and defunds that little office. And that's an office most people would never heard of. And they said, why would he defund an office for women's initiatives? He ought to be promoting that in the world. No, because that's not what it promotes. So he's putting people in place that actually understand the system, actually understand the key points, the pressure points, and how to touch them. We've been super impressed with how he puts the right people at the right places where it really matters.
Let me ask you this. I think you've testified before the Supreme Court before, haven't you?
Well, you don't testify, but we file briefs and we file arguments, and we're part of the legal teams that take the cases up there.
But let me ask you about the Supreme Court. Now, you know, the liberals have been ramming things through against the majority of Americans' wishes through the court system. And now that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have been appointed, things are turning around. And I think that's one of the things that has flushed all of this stuff to the surface. They're running scared. Yeah. So they're trying to pass these laws like in New York and New Jersey about actually infanticide. Yeah. So now they are talking about stacking the Supreme Court and increasing the number of justices. What do you think about this? What's your result?
I don't think it'll happen. I don't think it'll float. I think if they try to do that, the American people will have the same response they tried when they did it under FDR. FDR did not get away with it because people said, no, we've had it this way since 1789. It's worked really well. We don't want you changing the entire constitutional system just to get your political agenda through. And I agree with you, Andrew. There's no question in my mind that we keep seeing so many signals from the court. Two of the cases up this year. One, we're helping with one of the cases that heard just about a month ago, and it looks like the court has announced in several ways that they're going to end up rolling back about 50 to 60 years of bad Supreme Court decisions on religious liberty.
Oh, praise
they
God.
Actually took another religious liberty case. They sent it back to the lower courts, telling them, here's the way you need to do it. And they gave a real clear message to our guys of, if you want to win this when it comes back to us, argue this, this, this. I mean, they laid the whole thing out. So the fact that they're telling us how to win this, and they're telling us even the arguments they want to see because they want to dump some of the previous cases, they're telling us they want to roll this stuff back. We're seeing the same thing on abortion, and so is the other side. And because we're seeing the court start upholding state laws against abortion, the other side says, oh my gosh, these guys may overturn Roe v. Wade. We got to get it in our state constitution as soon as we can. And so you had New York, you had Virginia, you had Delaware, you had Connecticut. They defeated the one that came in New Mexico, but blue state after blue state after blue state, Washington State is working on it. They're scared the Supreme Court's going to end Roe v. Wade, roll back abortion, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And that's because of what's on the court. And I do not believe the court would be asking for us to send them certain cases unless they believe they had the 5 votes to do it. We haven't seen that under Scalia or anybody else because he knew he did not have the 5 votes with Justice Kennedy. But now they think they've got the 5 votes on these issues, and they're saying, send us the cases. We want this stuff.
Well, that's good.
You know, I know it's encouraging what's happened, but worst case scenario, if Trump did not get reelected, and if the Democrats continue and for instance, won the Senate and held the House, and, Ginsburg is getting way on up there and having health issues and stuff. Worst case scenario, one more judge leaving the bench and appointing a liberal, it could put us back to where we have lost whatever advantage we've got.
That's exactly right.
So
we had
it's a precarious position.
We had a 4.5 to 4.5 mix on the Supreme Court. We had 4 good guys, 4 bad guys, and 1 squish in the middle who didn't know what he really believed. Sometimes he'd vote with us, sometimes against us.
And he was appointed by Bush, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
No, he was appointed by Reagan, I think.
Anyway, I knew it was a conservative, but here's the problem. See, the liberals are so fanatical and committed. Like even when the Mueller report comes out, they aren't going to accept it. They're going to continue to push their agenda. But the Republicans are not as committed to their cause. And so like Reagan appointing somebody who was more of a moderate so he would look better. And I love Reagan. I think he was awesome. But still, I think that was a compromise. And I just praise God that we got Trump in there who doesn't really give a rip what anybody thinks. He's going to do what he thinks is right. And I'm so excited.
Well, you know this.
And you're right. Most Republicans are afraid to ruffle feathers. They're afraid to offend somebody. And Trump is kind of the position of we're going to do the right thing and we don't mind if it hurts somebody's feelings. The right thing is more important than somebody's feelings. And most Republicans haven't wanted to take that position because they were more politicians and statesmen. They wanted to be reelected. So we're going to say and do what we need to do to be reelected. And Trump is much more into doing the right thing. And I actually think that will be honored by the American people.
Yeah,
Maybe
I agree.
we're praying that God honors that too, as Trump is upholding a lot of biblical positions in many scenarios. But he's definitely one of those guys who's not afraid to say and do what he thinks is right.
Hallelujah.
And that very much is much more of the liberal and Democrat position, where they're going to fight for what they think is right, no matter what anybody else thinks. And Republicans more want to play nice and not hurt people's feelings. Democrats don't care about hurting your feelings. They're going to tell you what
Richard,
they think.
We need to break in. Both of you guys can talk, and both of us can talk, and we are having trouble getting Richard to say something. So, Richard,
this is awesome. Well, I was going to say, I think that this kind of highlights the importance of the 2020 Senate elections, and the margin there is just a few senators, and if the Democrats are able to flip enough seats and even pick up just a 1-seat majority, it's going to kill any chance of Trump getting more nominees, conservative nominees, confirmed. And so I think Ginsburg is probably just seeing if she can hang on until the 2020 elections. Maybe she wants to stay there till she dies. I don't know. But boy, folks need to pay attention to the Senate races coming up. And I saw the other day that I think it's 34 seats are up and 22 of them are Republicans.
That's right.
So we're going to be playing some defense there.
Wow.
There's going to be a lot of defense, and there will be a lot of money spent on that. And you're exactly right. Out of the 34, 22 are Republican. And so they're going to have to work really hard to retain the 53 that they have right now. No question that's going to be a difficult feat for them. And trying to retake the House again is going to be difficult. A lot of it will depend on who the nominee is for the Democrat side. That nominee will have a whole lot to say with what the turnout's going to be. And turnout is what drives everything in these kind of races.
Who are you guys hoping they nominate?
I'm hoping they nominate Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh,
Yes.
man.
I would cheer for that.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, they are so extreme that I think even the Democrats are running away from them.
Yeah,
They are.
She's missing a few screws, I think.
Well, it's because of her economics degree didn't help her with math very much, or the definitions of words. Those are hard things sometimes.
But I'm going to also point out, don't think that she is an anomaly for education. She's not.
No.
She is reflective of what's coming out with that younger group now. And her thinking is not radical. It may be radical to people with my color hair, but it's not radical to people who have gone through school the last 10, 15, 20 years in college.
And that is true. 75% of young people support the very things she is saying. 75% of people in college right now believe the same thing, where if you listen to her interviews where she tries to define socialism, and she says, well, to me, socialism is about equality and sharing. That's what most young people think socialism is. They don't know history well enough to recognize that it's actually destructive and government controlled and government run. And the only equality you have is the equality of like Venezuela, where you all are missing electricity and you all are starving and don't have water. That's the only equality it brings, is it makes you all desperate and hungry and sick and poor. Young people have no idea. So what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is saying, very much what most young people believe, which is why we encourage so much. We have to engage the next generation relationally. We have to communicate with them, love on them, help explain biblical truth and positions to them. And generally what we find is that most young people are very open. They're very willing to learn and be taught through relationship. They don't want somebody to tell them how they're dumb and they need to figure it out and be smarter. But when you love on people, right? I mean, what Jesus did in the Gospels, when you love on people, when you invest in their life, when you care about them, most young people are willing to listen and go, oh, I didn't think about that before. If you ask a young person, hey, do you know any nation in history that embraced socialism and then increased economic productivity and individual liberty? Has that ever happened for a nation? If you engage them in conversation and not in an aggressive manner, if you will just ask them questions through relationship, through love, and make them think, and they go, oh yeah, I don't think that's ever happened before. Yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't do that. They've never been challenged to think differently, and they only know what they've heard in culture from their professors, from social media, from the Hollywood elites who are promoting these agendas. Most young people have these bad ideas, and it's not because they're intentional. It's because they don't know better, and they're so winnable. So this is actually very encouraging for us. At WallBuilders, we're very encouraged. We do a lot of things to engage with young people all summer long. All we do are kids camps, leadership camps, engaging and challenging young people to think. And through relationship, they embrace truth. They embrace biblical principles. They embrace the free market. They go against socialism. But most young people have never been challenged to think. And that's why you're seeing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez exposed so badly, because she's never been challenged to think and defend these positions. And now she's an elected official.
You know, I actually heard a man interviewed on Laura Ingraham, and she asked him that exact question. Name me one nation that has embraced socialism, that it has helped them. And he skirted it, and she kept bringing him back. And finally, after the second or third time, he says, well, there isn't any, but it's because other capitalistic nations didn't support them, or it would have worked.
Yeah, it's always someone else's fault, right?
It was funny, though.
Yeah.
All right, we need to take some questions. And you know what? I got right into what we were talking about, and we didn't announce any of our stuff, so maybe we can leave just a few seconds at the end. We'll do that. But have we got some questions here from
we've got some questions. We've got lots of people watching tonight from looks like almost every state in the country, and Puerto Rico, Canada, Hong Kong, Albuquerque. That's not a country.
We need to educate some of our people on geography.
Albuquerque, that's in the southern hemisphere. But so here's a good question. Well, it disappeared on me. I believe there was. Oh, here we go. From Herman on Facebook. What issue do you think is under the radar should believers be aware of and watching in the news?
That's for you,
David
or Tim.
So under the radar depends on maybe how attuned you are. I think the things that are mostly under the radar we need to watch for are engaging the next generation, because we see things like abortion. We see things like socialism. We see the fruits. And we oftentimes want to fight back at the fruit and say, okay, socialism is bad, it's dumb, it's never worked. Abortion is evil. And it's like we're plucking the fruit off the tree, and the root is a very poor education system. But oftentimes we talk about with the next generation, you deal with two kinds of people largely in life, the intentional and the ignorant. The intentional know it's not true and they don't care. They're going to lie. They're going to promote that agenda anyway. Most people in the other category, they're ignorant, so they don't know. And I think the thing that's flying under the radar is how far the next generation has gone left in favor of unbiblical, secular, the pro-socialism, the LGBT, the transgender. They've gone so far, but nobody's really engaged them relationally, right? Most churches, we want to say that Jesus loves you, God's got a plan and purpose for your life. And even though that's true, and we totally believe in those things, we've not challenged them to think critically, to be problem solvers when it comes to these scenarios. And so I think the thing that's going under the radar is how far left the next generation has gone. But at the same time, it's gone under the radar how winnable and reachable they are through relationship. So to me, I would say the next generation is the big thing going under the radar.
Yeah, and I think there's some things under the radar, and some of them I'm glad are under the radar. It's not that I want them to be public, but different from that. Let me first say under the radar is judges, and judges should be watched for. What's happened now with 85 new judges in there, what's happened with now, it's being called a constitutional crisis. We have more than 160 judicial vacancies. The Democrats were screaming that 100 vacancies was a constitutional crisis. We've got 160 now. Even though the Republicans control the Senate, they can't control the rules, and the Democrats are using the rules to slow everything down. At this point right now, the number of nominees that Trump has nominated in his administration, it will take 11 years to get them all confirmed. In other words, there's no way they're going to be confirmed while he's president.
Not at the rate we're confirming them right now.
That's right, at the rate. And
so this is a delaying tactic, hoping that they get back in power, and then they'll just scrub these people and put in liberals.
That's right.
And so that's one. But there's others that are under the radar, and I think that's we talked earlier about how Trump really is willing to take the heat. I mean, he doesn't care if people beat up on him. And I think a lot of what he does with his tweets is actually intentional to create heat. Yeah. I think he creates turmoil intentionally because the media takes out like a worm on a hook for a bass. They go after that and they follow it and they stay on it. And so while he's doing that, nobody is watching what has happened with energy in America, how that America has taken off with energy. We now have freed several European nations from Russia's power. There's many European nations that don't have their own energy. They have to buy it from Russia. When you buy from Russia, you buy it on their terms. And so what's happened is nations are getting free, and we're the ones selling them all their energy.
For the first time in history, we're exporting more than we're importing, which has never happened ever before till Trump. And so there's a lot of those positive things. You even mentioned judges. I would say under the radar is how many judges he has nominated who are constitutional judges. Yeah. Obviously the news isn't promoting that on the same level, but probably of all the hundreds of judges he's put there, 90% or so, we would say, are probably the people we would have suggested. A very high ratio, which no conservative, no Republican president has ever nominated more constitutional judges on the federal, on the district, on the state levels than what we are seeing from Trump.
Well, something else that might be under the radar, I'd be interested to know what you guys think about this, but is what the Democrats are doing at the state level. So I think some folks here in Colorado have been a little bit blindsided by the radical left-wing homosexual agenda that's trying to be, that is being enacted here. And it looks, as we dig into it, it looks like this isn't just us, but that they're trying to implement this in many states across the country. Are you guys aware, and can you comment
Very
on
much
that?
aware. Yeah, there's a couple things going on. One is they're taking red states like Texas, a very, very red state, and almost turned it blue this election. And the way they do that is they go in and overbuild the urban areas. And when they overbuild the urban areas, they can get control of the state legislature. For example, if you look at all of Illinois, it's such a conservative state except Chicago. But Chicago is 55% of the population. If you look at Washington State, oh my gosh, when you get out on the eastern side of the state where all the cowboys are, it's like being down in Oklahoma. But the population's over in Seattle and Tacoma, SeaTac area, 55% of the population. New York State, how conservative are they except New York City? So what they do is they go into those areas, and Texas almost became blue this year because it was Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, and Houston against the rest of the state. So what they're doing is they move in, they really build up the urban areas, they really make that theirs. And then when they get the legislature, they start moving through sex education like you're talking about. That is really radical.
And they do have a strategic long-term plan. So often as conservatives, we get elected and we have one or two things and we fight for it that one year or two. No, the Democrats and liberals, they've had a beautiful long-term plan. And I'm saying beautiful in the sense of they've operated it very well, very effectively. And this is something that is not unusual to see in a lot of states that used to would never have embraced the gun control, the marijuana, the sex ed, the things that we are seeing happen in so many states. And it's because they've been fighting strategically for specific character, value, legislative pieces, whatever it is in their mind. And it's been a very good long-term plan. Oftentimes as conservatives, we're not good about going the distance of the journey. We want to have this one election and we got our guy elected. So now we can take a break and go home, kick up our heels. We're done. They're very good about staying engaged and active and involved, which is why we're seeing so many states embrace things that just a decade ago they never would have embraced because the other side has stayed active and engaged so well, so long.
Let me ask you a question about the Electoral College, because Colorado is basically trying to do away with that and go to nothing but popular vote. This was part of our founding, and they did it for a reason. What's your opinion on the Electoral College?
They did it for a reason because back then they had 13 states, and those 13 states were large and small. And it was very apparent that the population in 4 states was greater than the population in the other 9. And so the Founding Fathers looked at it and said, that means every president can come from 4 states. You guys make a coalition together. We'll never have a voice. And so Rhode Island will never have a chance, nor will Connecticut, nor will others. And so the Electoral College was to say, yeah, we want the popular vote, but it's got to be state by state, not the whole nation. Today, we have 50 states. We have Washington, D.C., so let's call it 51 voting entities. Today, the 4 largest states could get together and outvote the other 37. So essentially, you can win a presidential election by campaigning in 40 states, winning the popular vote there, and nobody else matters. The Founding Fathers said, no, you're going to have to go visit Montana, and you're going to have to go visit Nevada, and you're going to have to go visit. It's a brilliant system that they gave us. Now, I think this thing could backfire on them very easily because Trump won actually won the Electoral College. But let's say that Trump won the popular vote. He didn't win the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. Big majority of states voted for him. Let's say he won the popular vote. And let's say that Washington, D.C. voted, as they do, 93% for Democrat candidate. They voted for Hillary. And now they find that their votes are going to be for Trump. What do you think is going to happen in Washington, D.C. when they've been told their votes go for Trump?
I hadn't thought of that. There would be a rebellion.
Back out of that deal.
There will be a rebellion, and Democrat leaders have not thought of that. They thought we've been gypped, and they're going to have all their states turn on them. When you get a state like California, and California's just been told your votes all go for Trump, it's going to blow up.
Yeah.
And so this is not a thought-through plan in any way, shape, fashion, or form. It's a reaction. It's called the National Popular Vote. 12 states have passed it. They want other states to pass it as well.
But it is easier to manipulate a mob than it is to strategically win that many states. And so I think they are thinking a little bit about this because they're masters of manipulation in many cases. But certainly there is maybe some unintended or unthought through consequences that could happen because you're right. If Trump won the popular vote, all of a sudden they're in favor of the Electoral College.
That's right.
I don't support the popular vote anymore. Electoral College. But right now, they're just trying to find any way they can to win. And they think that if we can get rid of Electoral College, right, there's 20 cities that if we can get these 20 cities all to vote for our candidate, we're going to win the election just from these 20 cities, which actually is true.
And there's 35,000 cities in America, and 20 cities have enough population to win the entire popular vote. So imagine 20 cities telling the other 34,980, we don't care about you. That's what it would be.
Yeah, so this is basically going to just... New
York City, Miami, Los Angeles, if you had a collaboration of those cities and they're telling everybody else what to do, well, that's actually, I think, strategically what the Democrats want because they think they can control those cities and win the popular vote.
So if you live in one of these, if you live someplace besides one of these 20 cities, basically they take away your vote.
That's right. That's exactly it. And that's what the Founding Fathers recognized when they wrote the Constitution, which is why they changed the system to make sure you could not do that.
So isn't this constitutional to have the Electoral College? How can they just change this?
Well, this is the debate because a lot of constitutional people believe you can't change that system. You got to change the Constitution. It needs a constitutional amendment. However, the Constitution does say that the states get to choose the time, the manner, and the places of elections. So there's a lot of authority given to the states in elections. And so they can argue that, look, we don't need to change the Constitution. We're just all pooling our resources as states. We have the right to decide how elections go in our states. And we're just all, and so it's like, they call it a state compact, is what it is. Yeah. So there's an argument on both sides. I think if it ever got to the court, it would never sustain the court. But the question is, can you get it to the court?
Right.
Have we got time for another question?
Yeah, we do. Here's a really good question coming from Ruthie on chat, and the question is, were there ever any prior historical events where America looked like what we look like now?
Yes. 1856, we were just as polarized over several issues. We were talking today that you can take several issues they had back then and replace it with today. If you take the word slavery and replace it with abortion, and if you take some of these words over their issues and our issues, the same kind of polarization, the same kind of proclivity to violence, the same kind of end justifies the means, we won't talk to you. Yes, we've been here before and it did not turn out well. So we really need to change the tone of what's going on. We need the people to get involved and not just put it on their leaders. This is something that can be fixed by the people very easily if they will, but they've got to get engaged.
And of course, the end result of that was we had a civil war. But, you know, Jamie is just now reading Ulysses S. Grant biography. And I didn't know this, but after the Civil War, like in Louisiana, you might know these things much better than I do, but they actually elected a Republican, a white Republican governor, I believe it was. And the Democrats didn't like it, and they came in and killed, I think it was 2,100 blacks, and they killed 2,500 or 3,000 whites, and they basically overthrew the governor and kicked him out. And Grant was afraid that the Civil War was going to start up again. It did not just solve all of the problems. The South was still in rebellion.
It did not solve. As a matter of fact, in the South, they did not start celebrating the 4th of July until nearly 30 years later. It was 1892 before they celebrated the 4th of July. They were not happy to be back in that place that didn't have blacks as an inferior race. And it was not a good deal. And that in Louisiana, you had the white governor, but you had a black lieutenant governor. You had a black-white combination. Pinchback was his name. And man, they went crazy, just as they did in Texas, as they did in South Carolina and Florida. All those states had massive, massive, massive riots that resulted in the deaths of thousands and thousands over that reaction to ending slavery and allowing blacks to be elected.
And David, let me just give a pitch for your teaching on American history in black and white. Like I told you, I listened to that 3 times in one day. There's 2 CDs in there, and I was shocked. You had actually statements from black legislators who were elected in the 70s, 1870s, and they were arguing against the liberals, against the Democrats that time. And I mean, it's phenomenal. And people have this impression that America has always been racist. And there's always been racist people in America, just like there are now. But man, they were fighting against slavery. I learned things through that I would just recommend people get that from WallBuilders, American History in Black and White. I guarantee you it would change a lot of things that you believe.
We got about 4 to 5 minutes left.
All right, so we were going to tell you how you could give a question. I skipped all of the preliminaries, but we have a giveaway, and if you sign up and with us, you can get a gift. You have this information?
Yes, sir, I do. Yeah.
Go ahead and give this.
Well, this week's gift is Every Day with Jesus, Andrew's devotional. I've got this. It's a wonderful tool, wonderful book, and so if you register on our website, you can be eligible for that gift, and we'll announce that winner next week. This week's winner of Christian philosophy is James Bratton. So congratulations, James. You're our week's winner. So we'll be emailing you shortly about that.
And you know, we've got a lot of things coming up. We just got through having our men's advance with James Brown and Tony Dungy, and it was phenomenal. They went into the high schools and spoke. And I tell you, it was powerful. And we have coming up, we have our Army meeting. This stands for the Association of Related Ministries International. And we've got General Jerry Boykin with us and Congressman Bob McEwen. We'll be speaking along with the people who are the leaders of our Army situation. It's going to be awesome. We've got a musical, King of Jerusalem, coming up, and that's on April the 12th and the 13th. And I tell you, it is phenomenal. It's Broadway quality. We've got John Tesh is going to be in concert with us on the 25th of April. God is just bringing some movers and shakers through here, and it's amazing how God's connecting us. And,
It is amazing.
and that's a free concert. John Tesh normally charges, but this is a free concert. We got a 3,200-seat auditorium. We'd love to have you come. And last thing, we got a Kingdom Business Summit coming up June the 12th through the 14th, and we're going to have some movers and shakers there too, some people that are going to make a big difference. So we encourage you to be a part of that.
Let me say this, if I can, real quick about Congressman McEwen, Bob McEwen. He's going to be our guest next week here on the Truth and Liberty livecast. And if you want to present a question to Congressman McEwen, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to get to all of them, but we're going to have something come up on our website this week where you can post your question on there, and we'll be looking those over and hopefully present some of those to the Congressman when he's with us.
And David and Tim, again, we want to thank you, but we want you to give your address so that people can get hold of this. I know that there's some people that may not have heard of you. You're very well known, but in case they haven't, they need to be able to take advantage of your ministry. How do they do that?
The best way is WallBuilders.com. We're all over social media as well. So we have a YouTube channel. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We do videos throughout the week. So we would love for people to be able to see those, be encouraged and blessed by those. But WallBuilders.com is the best place to get more information.
And David, you also have a radio program, don't you?
We do. We have a daily radio program. It's on about 400 stations nationally, but it's a podcast as well. And thousands, tens of thousands download the podcast daily. WallBuildersLive.com.
And I tell you, if you've never heard David or Tim minister, you have missed a blessing. You will learn more in just an hour's presentation than probably you've known about American history in your whole life. So you need to check them out. Thank you guys for being with us. I sure appreciate what you're doing, and you've really impacted my life and changed a lot of my perspective on things. You're a blessing.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure, and we love you too, Andrew and Richard. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. So for those of you watching again, we just thank you for being a part of this. This Truth and Liberty is something that we started a little over a year ago, and every Monday night we have a 50-minute broadcast like this. We're also broadcast over CTN, and they are carrying this for us. You can also go to our website, truthandliberty.net, and Richard here this is just what he's added this week. There's probably over 50 pages. He's got the entire Mueller report on here. It is a great website. We link to WallBuilders, to all of these other things. So it's kind of a clearinghouse where you can go and get information, find out candidates, what their voting record is. It's just a great place, truthandliberty.net, and it would be a real blessing to you. So we thank you for joining us tonight, and we encourage you to join us every Monday night. We believe that this is making a difference. And hopefully it's not just stirring you up and get you agitated, but it's giving you some practical things so that you can go out and make a difference in the world you live in. Thank you for being with us. God bless you. We'll see you again next Monday night as we have Bob McEwen on as our guest on Truth and Liberty.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net.